To a soldier on the Western Front, a tin of Maconochie stew was a gamble that rarely paid off. If you were lucky, you found a recognizable chunk of meat floating in the thin, salty brine. If you weren't, it was just cold turnips and carrots, congealed in animal fat that coated the roof of your mouth like wax. Welcome to dulled history. Tonight, we are stripping away the maps and the strategy to look at the fuel that kept the war machine running, the food. We're going to explore exactly what it meant to eat, drink, and survive in the trenches of World War I, where a hot cup of tea could taste like gasoline, and a biscuit was durable enough to be used as building material. This isn't the history of generals dining in chateaus behind the lines. This is the history of the mess tin, the field kitchen, and the relentless, gnawing hunger that defined life for millions of men buried in the mud. Well, look at the logistics of getting hot soup to a freezing ditch, the chemistry of hardtack, and the creative lengths soldiers went to just to make their rations palatable. It is a story of endurance measured in calories and tin cans. So, adjust your pillows, let the tension leave your shoulders, and prepare to step into the past. We are going back to 1916, where the only thing consistent about the menu is the mud. The transition happens not with a flash of light, but with a drop in temperature. The dry, climate-controlled air of your room is replaced by a heavy, damp chill that seems to bypass your skin and settle directly into your bones. It is the pre-dawn gray of northern France, a flat, desaturated world where the sky and the earth seem to be made of the same exhausted material. You are standing on a wooden duckboard, slick with slime, at the bottom of a trench that is perhaps 6 feet deep. The walls are earth, reinforced with sandbags and woven willow branches that are slowly rotting in the wet. The air smells of wet wool, stale tobacco, chloride of lime used for sanitation, and the faint, metallic tang of old explosives. You are wearing a heavy, rough tunic that itches at the collar, and your boots are caked in a clay so thick it feels as if you are wearing weights around your ankles. You are awake because everyone is awake. It is stand to, the morning ritual of readiness. Every man is on the fire step, rifle in hand, staring out into the gray mist of no man's land, waiting for an attack that usually doesn't come. This is the hour of maximum tension, but as the sun finally breaches the horizon, a pale, watery disk that offers no real warmth, the whistle blows for stand down. The tension evaporates, replaced instantly by the primal demands of the body. You haven't eaten since yesterday evening, and in the damp cold, your metabolism is screaming for fuel. The adrenaline fades, leaving you shivering, and your thoughts turn immediately, obsessively, to breakfast. Breakfast in the trenches is not a singular event, but a complex logistical miracle that often fails. It begins miles behind you. You can hear the faint clatter of the ration parties returning through the communication trenches. These are men from your platoon who were sent back to the support lines or the reserve trenches hours ago, navigating a labyrinth of mud in the dark to fetch the supplies. They carry sandbags filled with loaves of bread, heavy wooden crates of tinned meat, and most importantly, the petrol cans filled with water or tea. You watch them stumble into your section of the line, exhausted, mud splattered up to their eyebrows, their burdens deposited with a heavy thud on the fire step. The first thing you reach for is the tea. In the British trenches, tea is not a beverage. It is a vital life support system. It is brewed in great iron cauldrons back at the field kitchens, boiled until it is dark as tar, mixed with heaps of sugar and condensed milk until it is a thick, syrupy energy drink. But the journey from the kitchen to your lip is perilous. The tea is transported in 2-gallon cans that were originally manufactured to hold fuel for vehicles. Despite the best efforts to clean them, scouring them with sand and boiling water, the ghost of the petrol remains. As you dip your battered enamel mug into the can, the steam rising into your face carries a distinct chemical aroma. You take a sip. The liquid is lukewarm now, having lost its heat during the long carry through the communication trenches. It is incredibly sweet, the condensed milk giving it a creamy, sickly texture. But underneath the sugar and the tea leaves, there is that unmistakable, oily aftertaste of gasoline. You drink it anyway. You drink it greedily. In this freezing ditch, calories are heat, and the sugar hits your bloodstream with a necessary jolt. It washes away the taste of the night, the stale air, the grit between your teeth. You wrap your cold, grime-stained hands around the mug, leaching every degree of warmth from the metal into your skin. This mug is your most prized possession right now, a small circle of civilization in a chaotic world. Next comes the solid food. If the supply lines are running smoothly, you might get a piece of bacon. This isn't the crisp, streaky bacon of a modern breakfast. It is usually fat bacon, thick slabs of white, salted pork fat with a singular stripe of pink meat running through it. It arrives cold and greasy. If you are lucky, you have a small, illicit fire-going a Tommy cooker, made from a tin can filled with fabric soaked in whale oil or paraffin. You hold the bacon over the weak, flickering flame on the end of a bayonet or a pocket knife. The fat renders slowly, dripping into the fire and causing it to flare and hiss. You aren't trying to cook it for flavor. You are trying to melt it just enough to make it swallowable. The saltiness is intense, triggering a thirst that the petrol tea can barely quench, but the fat is necessary. It lubricates the system, providing the dense energy needed to keep your body temperature up against the relentless damp. But often there is no bacon. Often there is only the biscuit. The official name is the service biscuit, but everyone calls them dog biscuits, molar breakers, or tiles. They are square, pale crackers about 4 inches across, stamped with the manufacturer's name. Huntley and Palmer's is a common one. They are baked to be indestructible. They contain flour, water, and salt, dried out until they have the structural integrity of a brick. They are designed to last for years in damp warehouses without spoiling, and they achieve this by being utterly devoid of moisture. You hold the biscuit in your hand. It feels heavy, dense like a piece of slate. You try to bite off a corner, but your teeth skid off the surface. To eat a service biscuit requires strategy. You cannot simply chew it. You have to break it. You might wrap it in a piece of cloth and smash it with the butt of your rifle or a trenching tool, reducing it to a coarse powder that you can mix with water to form a sort of gruel. Or, more commonly, you dunk it. You submerge the biscuit in your tea, holding it there, counting the seconds. You have to wait until the hot liquid penetrates the outer shell, softening the cemented flour structure. If you pull it out too soon, it's still rock hard. If you wait too long, it disintegrates into a mush at the bottom of your mug, creating a sludge of tea and dough. There is a rhythm to this eating. Bite, chew, swallow, sip. You eat standing up or sitting on a crate, your eyes constantly scanning the parapet, your ears tuned to the shriek of incoming shells. Eating is not a leisure activity. It is a tactical refueling. The bread, if you get it, is dark and dense. By the time it reaches the front, it is often stale. In the winter, the loaves can freeze solid, requiring you to thaw them inside your tunic or near a brazier. In the summer, the bread arrives in sandbags that have been dragged through the mud. The crust's hard and sometimes gnawed on by the other inhabitants of the trench, the rats. You learn to inspect every mouthful. The trenches are an ecosystem of vermin, and the food supply is their primary target. The rats here are legendary, creatures that have grown fat and bold on the abundance of waste and death. They are not the shy creatures of a city alley. They are large, brown, and fearless. They will chew through a canvas haversack to get to a piece of bread. When you open a fresh loaf, you check for the telltale tunnel marks where a rat might have burrowed in. You cut around the damage, wasting nothing. Disgust is a luxury you cannot afford. You simply discard the contaminated portion and eat the rest. The centerpiece of the soldier's diet, however, is the tin of bully beef. This is corned beef, preserved in a rectangular can with a specialized key attached to the side for opening. You take the key, slot it onto a small metal tab, and begin to wind. The metal strip curls back, revealing the meat inside. In the cold of the morning, the beef is a solid block of pinkish red meat, encased in a thick layer of white, waxy fat. It doesn't look like food. It looks like a geological sample. You dig it out with your knife. The texture is grainy and stringy, breaking apart into chunks. It is intensely salty, designed to be preserved indefinitely. Eaten cold, the fat coats your tongue and throat, leaving a greasy film that is hard to clear. It sits heavy in your stomach, a dense ball of protein and sodium. Soldiers come up with endless ways to disguise the bully beef. They mash it with the biscuit powder to make riso, a kind of trench meatball fried in bacon fat. They curry it if they can get powder from home. They mix it with potatoes if the field kitchens are feeling generous. Mostly you eat it straight from the can, the metal rim pressing against your lip, the smell of cured meat mixing with the smell of the trench. As the morning wears on, the activity in the trench shifts from the urgency of stand to the drudgery of daily maintenance. The food you have just eaten sits like a weight in your gut, but it provides the energy to move. You are assigned to a fatigue, party repairing the sandbags that have slumped during the night. The physical labor is constant. You are filling bags with heavy, wet clay, hoisting them onto the parapet, beating them flat with a shovel. The exertion warms you, and for a moment you forget the cold. But the mud is an adversary that never rests. It sucks at your boots, making every step a workout. It coats your hands, finding its way under your fingernails and into the creases of your skin. Hygiene is a memory. There is no running water here, no sinks to wash your hands before a meal. You wipe your hands on your trousers, which are just as dirty. You accept that you are consuming a certain amount of the trench with every meal, grit, soil, and whatever microscopic bacteria thrive in this environment. Dysentery is common, a constant, low-level threat that tracks the army as closely as the enemy does. You see men doubled over, pale and sweating, not from fear, but from the simple biological failure caused by dirty hands and tainted water. You drink your tea, hoping the boiling water killed the worst of it. Around mid-morning, the hunger returns, or perhaps it is just boredom. The trench is a place of extreme contrasts, hours of terrifying violence sandwiched between days of mind-numbing tediousness. Food becomes the primary way to break up the time. You check your pockets. Maybe you have a parcel from home. This is the gold standard of trench dining, a package wrapped in brown paper and string, smelling of home. Inside, there might be a dense fruit cake, baked by a mother or wife weeks ago. It is dry, but it tastes of butter and sugar and safety. There might be a tin of sardines, a luxury compared to the bully beef, or chocolate-hard, white-bloomed chocolate that snaps with a sharp crack. You ration these personal supplies strictly. You don't eat a whole bar of chocolate at once. You break off a single square and let it dissolve slowly on your tongue, closing your eyes and trying to block out the reality of your surroundings. That sweetness is a tether to a world where people sleep in beds and walk on paved streets. You might share a piece with the man next to you. The sharing of food is a sacred ritual here. A cigarette for a biscuit, a piece of chocolate for a sip of rum. It creates a bond stronger than rank or regulation. You watch each other eat, a silent acknowledgement of your shared survival. Water is a constant obsession. You are surrounded by water. It stands in puddles at your feet. It drips from the dugouts. It falls from the sky. But almost none of it is safe to drink. The landscape of the Western Front is poisoned. The shell craters are filled with green, stagnant soup that contains the chemical residue of high explosives, mustard gas, and the decay of the unburied. To drink from a shell hole is to invite death. So you rely entirely on the petrol cans brought up by the ration parties. You guard your canteen jealously. You learn to take small sips, swirling the water around your mouth to wet your throat without swallowing too much. When the water runs out, the thirst becomes a physical pain, a dryness that makes your tongue swell and your voice rasp. As noon approaches, the sun is high, but the trench remains a shadowy, damp canyon. The field kitchens might send up a hot meal if the shelling isn't too heavy. This is usually a stew, cooked in massive quantities. It arrives in Dixie's large oval metal pots carried by two men on a pole. The stew is a mystery. It contains whatever was available: potatoes, onions, turnips, and meat of indeterminate origin. Sometimes it is thick and hearty. Other times it is little more than gray water with a few floating vegetables. The arrival of the Dixies is a major event. Men gather around, mess tins held out like begging bowls. The sergeant ladles it out, trying to be fair, but the men at the front of the line get the thick stew from the bottom, while the men at the back get the broth. You watch the ladle dip and pour. When it's your turn, you inspect the serving. It's hot, which is the most important thing. You retreat to a fire bay to eat. The metal of the mess tin conducts the heat, warming your hands. You spoon the stew into your mouth quickly before the cold air steals the warmth. The potatoes are soft, almost dissolving. The meat is chewy. It tastes of salt and pepper and the metal of the pot. It fills the empty space in your stomach, a warm weight that makes the cold feel a little less aggressive. After the stew, there is the cleanup. You have no soap, no hot water for washing dishes. You scrub your mess tin with a handful of earth or sand, using the abrasive grit to scour away the grease. Then you wipe it out with a rag or a piece of newspaper. It isn't clean in the modern sense, but it is visually empty. You slide the tin back into your haversack. The grease stains the canvas. Everything you own is slowly becoming coated in a layer of fat and mud. The afternoon stretches out. This is the time for chores that feel absurd in the context of a war but are necessary for sanity. You might sit on a crate and delouse your shirt. This is a daily ritual as common as eating. The lice soldiers call them chats live in the seams of your uniform, feeding on your blood and leaving itchy red welts across your torso. They are immune to the cold and the wet. The only way to kill them is heat. You take off your tunic and turn it inside out. You run the flame of a candle or a cigarette lighter along the seams. You hear the faint, sharp pop as the lice explode in the heat. It is a satisfying sound, a tiny victory over a tiny enemy. You pick the eggs out with your fingernails. You know they will be back tomorrow, but for now you are cleaning your house. While you hunt lice, you might snack on a piece of cheese. The army cheddar is infamous. It is yellow, sweating oil and hard enough to carve. It comes in large blocks wrapped in cheesecloth. It has a sharp, biting flavor that stings the tongue. It doesn't melt, it just sweats. You cut off a chunk with your knife and chew it slowly. It pairs well with the hardtack, the two dense textures battling it out in your mouth. This is raw fuel fat and carbohydrates needed to keep your body furnace burning. You might find yourself craving strange things. Men dream of fruit-fresh apples, oranges, anything with juice and crunch. The diet here is soft, boiled, and preserved. Your teeth ache for something crisp. Scurvy is a real risk, kept at bay only by the occasional lime juice ration or the turnips in the stew. There is a distinct lack of color in your diet. Everything is brown, gray, or white. Brown tea, gray stew, white biscuits, pink-gray beef. The visual monotony matches the landscape. You find yourself staring at the bright red label on a jam tin just to see a primary color. The jam is almost always plum and apple. It is a running joke in the army that there are no other fruits in the world. The jam comes in tins that are often sealed so tightly they have to be opened with a bayonet. Inside, it is a sticky, dark purple mass. It is sweet, but it contains very little actual fruit pulp, mostly pectin and sugar. You spread it thick on a biscuit, the sweetness masking the stale flour taste. It is sticky, getting on your fingers, attracting the wasps in the summer and the flies. Flies are the other constant companion at the dinner table. In the summer months, they are a plague. They swarm over the latrines, over the dead in no man's land, and then over your food. They are black, buzzing clouds that land on your jam, your beef, your lips. You wave them away, but they are relentless. You learn to eat with one hand, guarding your mouth, a futile attempt to keep them out. In the winter, at least, the flies are gone, killed by the frost. But the winter brings its own challenges. Food freezes. You might find your water bottle is a solid block of ice in the morning. You have to sleep with it inside your tunic to keep it liquid. As the light begins to fade in the late afternoon, the cycle of the trench slows down again. The aggressive boredom of the day gives way to the anxiety of the coming night. You prepare for the evening stand-to, but before that there is the evening meal. Usually this is leftovers, cold stew, more bread and jam, perhaps a piece of hard cheese. You eat it quickly as the shadows lengthen. The temperature drops again, the damp rising from the duckboards. You are fueling up for the long night watch, for the wiring parties, for the raids. You check your pockets for a few loose biscuits to keep in your tunic for the middle of the night. You take a final swig of the petrol-tasting water. The experience of eating in the trenches is one of mechanical necessity stripped of all pleasure, yet it remains the highlight of the day. It is the only time you have agency, the only time you can do something for yourself. Opening a tin, boiling water, chewing a biscuit, these are small acts of creation in a world dedicated to destruction. You wipe your mouth with the back of your hand. You feel the grit of the trench on your lips. You are full, or at least not empty, and in this place that is enough. You pick up your rifle. The sun is gone. The rats are waking up, starting their scuffling patrol along the parapet. It is night again. You are ready to endure. The darkness does not fall gently here. It consumes. Unlike the slow, romantic fading of twilight in a peaceful world, night on the Western Front arrives like a heavy curtain dropping, obliterating the horizon and shrinking your universe to the few feet of mud directly in front of you. The visual world, which had been so gray and monotonous during the day, disappears entirely, replaced by a landscape constructed purely of sound and sensation. You are standing on the fire step again, your boots shifting in the slick clay, staring into a void that you know is populated by thousands of other men doing exactly the same thing. The air has changed. The dampness that hung in the background during the day now becomes aggressive, a physical presence that presses against your face and seeps through the layers of your wool tunic. This is the night watch, the sentry go, usually a 2-hour shift that feels like a lifetime. Your primary duty is simply to look and listen, to interpret the chaos of the dark. Without your eyes to anchor you, your other senses go into overdrive. You hear the wind hissing through the rusted barbed wire in no man's land, a sound like dry bones rattling. You hear the squelch of a boot pulling out of deep mud somewhere to your left. Is it one of yours or one of theirs? You hear the distant, rhythmic thump-thump-thump of a machine gun firing miles away, the sound carried on the damp air like a pulse. Your mouth is dry, despite the moisture in the air. The residue of the evening meal, the grease of the bully beef, the chemical tang of the tea has faded, leaving a stale metallic taste on your tongue. You run your tongue over your teeth, feeling the grit that never really goes away. Hunger in the trenches is not a clockwork mechanism. It is a constant, low-level hum that spikes with the cold. Your body is burning calories simply trying to stay warm. You find yourself fantasizing about heat, not just the heat of a fire, but the heat of food. A steaming bowl of porridge, a roasted potato with a crisp skin. The memory of these things is so vivid it makes your jaw ache. Suddenly the darkness is shattered. A very light, a flare fired from a pistol arcs into the sky with a sharp phut sound. It hangs there, suspended by a small parachute, burning with a brilliant magnesium-white intensity. For 20 seconds the world is illuminated in a stark, terrifying relief. The shadows are long and sharp, dancing wildly as the flare drifts. You freeze. This is the cardinal rule. When the light goes up, you turn to stone. Movement attracts the eye, and the eye directs the bullet. You stand rigid, your breath held in your chest, feeling exposed and naked in the sudden glare. You can see the jagged stumps of trees, the craters filled with black water, the tangled mess of wire that looks like tumbleweeds made of iron. Then the flare sputters and dies, and the darkness rushes back in, blacker and more impenetrable than before. The spots dance in your vision, blinding you completely for a few moments. It is during these long, hollow hours of the watch that the SRD becomes the most important acronym in your life. Supply Reserve Depot. It is stamped on the heavy, stoneware jars that contain the army rum. The rum ration is a subject of near-religious reverence among the men. It is not just alcohol. It is medicine. It is courage. It is the only warmth you will feel tonight. You hear the officer and the sergeant making their rounds, the distinctive clink of the ceramic jar against a mess tin. They move down the traverse, stopping at each post. When they reach you, the ritual is brief and serious. You hold out your mug, or sometimes just open your mouth if you don't have a vessel handy. The officer pours. The ration is small, officially 1/16 of a pint, roughly 2 tablespoons. But it is potent. It is thick, dark rum, heavy with molasses and a raw, burning alcohol content. You toss it back in one swallow. It hits your throat like liquid fire, a shock to the system that makes your eyes water. You feel the heat track all the way down to your stomach, where it blossoms into a radiant warmth that spreads through your chest. For a few minutes, the cold recedes. The knot of tension in your gut loosens. The mud seems less deep, the night less hostile. It doesn't make you drunk. The dose is too small, and your metabolism too high for that, but it dulls the sharp edges of your reality. It is a chemical barrier between you and the misery. With the rum swirling in your system, you return to the watch. The sounds of the night change. You begin to hear the activity of the scavengers. The rats are bolder now. You can hear them scuttling along the parados, the back wall of the trench. They squeak and fight over the debris of the day's meals. If you stand still enough, they might run right over your boots. You kick out, more out of reflex than malice, but they are quick. They are the true masters of this environment, perfectly adapted to a world of waste. You envy them their fur, their ability to find sustenance in the garbage. Midway through the night, a new sound emerges from the communication trenches behind you. It is the heavy, labored breathing of men carrying burdens, accompanied by the clatter of metal on wood. The ration party is back, or perhaps a carrying party bringing up engineering supplies. Logistics never sleep. They are bringing RE Material Royal Engineers supplies, rolls of barbed wire, pigtail stakes, corkscrew-shaped metal posts that can be twisted silently into the ground, and heavy A-frames for duckboards. You might be tapped on the shoulder and told you are part of a working party. This is the irony of the rest period in the trenches. It is rarely restful. You hand your rifle to a mate or sling it across your back, and you are handed a shovel or a coil of wire. The wire is hateful stuff. It is heavy, greasy, and spiteful. The barbs catch on your uniform, your skin, your equipment. Carrying a roll of wire through a narrow, zigzagging trench in the pitch dark is a physical puzzle. You bump into the revetments, you trip on broken duckboards, you curse in a whisper. If you are unlucky, the working party is going over the top. You have to repair the wire in no man's land. This is a task that requires a different kind of courage. You climb out of the trench, leaving the relative safety of the earth walls and crawl out into the open. The ground here is different. It is churned up, soft and treacherous. You are crawling through a graveyard of previous attacks. You feel things under your hands, shreds of uniform, pieces of metal, slick patches that you try not to identify. Out here, the silence is absolute. You are working with a small team, twisting the metal stakes into the ground, unspooling the wire. You cannot use a hammer. The sound would carry for miles. You have to use muffled mallets or simply the strength of your hands. The wire tears at your gloves. You are sweating despite the freezing air. a cold sweat that makes your clothes clammy. Every time a flare goes up, you press your face into the mud, embracing the filth, praying you look like a corpse or a mound of earth. The smell of the earth out here is raw and ancient wet soil, rotting vegetation, and the chemical residue of gas. When the job is done, you crawl back. The moment you slide back over the parapet and your boots hit the duckboards of your own trench is a moment of profound relief. You are back in the safe zone. You wipe the mud from your hands, but it is smeared into your skin. You are exhausted, your muscles trembling from the tension of being exposed. And with the relief comes the hunger again. The physical exertion of the wiring party has burned through the evening stew and the rum. You need calories. You stumble towards a dugout. These are underground shelters carved into the side of the trench, usually reinforced with timber beams and corrugated iron. You push aside the gas curtain, a heavy, chemically treated blanket that hangs over the doorway, and step inside. The atmosphere in the dugout is thick enough to chew. It is warm, relatively speaking, heated by the body warmth of a dozen men and a few smoking candles. Air is stagnant, smelling of unwashed bodies, drying wool, stale tobacco smoke, and damp earth. The dugout is cramped. Men are sleeping on wire bunks or simply on the floor, wrapped in their greatcoats and blankets. It is a tangle of limbs. You find a small space, perhaps sitting on a crate or squeezing onto the edge of a bunk. You might have a friend in the dugout, a small personal stove. You take out your mess tin and a packet of cocoa powder if you have one, or perhaps a cube of oxo bouillon. You heat water over the tiny flame. The process is slow, hypnotic. You watch the bubbles form, waiting for the steam. The cocoa is gritty, mixed with water rather than milk, but it is hot. You wrap your hands around the tin again, the metal almost burning your palms. You sip it slowly. It tastes of chocolate and dust. It coats your throat, washing away the taste of the fear from no man's land. You might fish out a hard biscuit from your pocket, softening it in the cocoa. This late-night meal is solitary and quiet. The men around you are sleeping the sleep of the dead deep, snoring, twitching with dreams. You watch the candle flame flicker, casting long, wavering shadows on the timber walls. You can see the water dripping slowly from the roof, a metronome counting down the seconds of the night. As you sit there, the adrenaline of the patrol fades, replaced by a leaden fatigue. Your eyelids feel like they are made of iron. You know you have to sleep, to grab whatever rest you can before the next stand-to at dawn. You arrange yourself as best you can. You loosen your puttees, the cloth wrappings around your lower legs, to let the blood flow, but you keep your boots on. You never take your boots off in the line. If an attack comes, you need to be ready to move instantly. Also, if you take them off, your feet might swell so much you can't get them back on. You pull your greatcoat tight around you. It is heavy, stiff with dried mud and smells of wet dog. You pull your blanket up. It is scratchy and rough. You use your pack as a pillow. The hardness of the equipment presses into your head, but you don't care. You close your eyes. The sounds of the trench are muffled here. The dull thud of shelling feels like a heartbeat in the earth. The snoring of your comrades is a comforting noise, a reminder that you are not alone. Sleep comes quickly, but it is not a peaceful sleep. It is a shallow, gray drift. You dream of simple things. You dream of a table with a white tablecloth. You dream of a plate of roast beef, pink and juicy with steam rising from it. You dream of a glass of clean, cold water that tastes of nothing but water. You dream of silence, but the night has other plans. You are woken. It feels like minutes later, but might have been hours by a change in the rhythm of the trench. A sentry has shaken you awake. It's not an attack, but a gas alert. The klaxon is sounding somewhere down the line, a hoarse, rhythmic honking. You scramble up, your heart hammering against your ribs. You fumble for your gas mask satchel on your chest. You pull out the masca hood of rubberized canvas with round glass eyepieces. You pull it over your head, struggling with the straps. The world instantly changes. You are looking through foggy, yellowed lenses. The air you breathe is sucked through a filter box, tasting of charcoal and rubber. Your own breath sounds loud and rasping in your ears. The mask is stifling, claustrophobic. You feel cut off from the world, sealed inside your own head. You sit there in the dim light of the dugout, surrounded by other men who have turned into bug-eyed monsters. You wait. You sniff the air cautiously. Is there the smell of pear drops, of geraniums? These are the scents of death phosgene mustard gas. The alert passes. It was a false alarm, or the wind changed. You tear the mask off, gasping for the cool, damp air of the dugout, which suddenly tastes sweet and fresh. The adrenaline spike has ruined your sleep. You sit up, rubbing your face where the rubber seal has dug into your skin. You are awake now. Your stomach growls. The hunger is back. You decide to check your haversack again. You find the remnants of a tin of Maconochie stew from earlier. It is cold, the fat congealed into a white solid. You don't have the energy to light the stove again. You use your spoon to dig out a chunk of the cold stew. It is a texture that defies description: slimy, lumpy, cold. The turnips are mushy, the meat stringy, but you eat it. You eat it because your body demands it. You chew mechanically, staring at the dirt floor. This is fuel, just fuel. As the early hours of the morning stretch on, the temperature drops to its lowest point. This is the wolf hour, the time when vitality is at its lowest, when the will to live feels thinnest. The cold seems to emanate from the earth itself. You are shivering uncontrollably now, a deep somatic shuddering that shakes your whole frame. You huddle closer to the man next to you, sharing body heat without shame or comment. It is a pile of puppies, a heap of survival. You start to think about the morning tea. The anticipation of that petrol-tasting, sugary hot liquid becomes the entire focus of your existence. You visualize the steam. You imagine the heat of the mug. It is a small hope, a tiny beacon in the dark, but it is enough to pull you through the next hour. You think about the supply wagons miles back, imagining the tea being brewed, the sugar being poured. You construct a mental narrative of the tea's journey to you. Outside the dugout, the war continues its low-intensity murmuring. A machine gun chatters briefly, then stops. A shell whistles over, landing far to the rear with a dull crump. The rats squeal. The water drips. You are in a suspended state, neither fully asleep nor fully awake, existing in a gray limbo of endurance. You remember a story a veteran told you about a parcel he once received that contained a whole roast chicken, sealed in a tin. He described the jelly around the bones, the way the meat fell apart. You replay this description in your head, adding your own details. You imagine the salt, the herbs. It is a torture, but a pleasant one. It distracts you from the cold. Eventually, the darkness outside begins to shift. It doesn't get light so much as it gets less dark. The black turns to charcoal, then to slate. The order comes down the line. Stand to. It is time to go back to the fire step. The cycle is restarting. You drag yourself up, your joints stiff, your muscles aching. You pick up your rifle. It is cold and damp to the touch, covered in a film of condensation. You stumble out of the dugout into the trench. The air is raw. The mist is thick, clinging to the ground. You take your place on the step. You look out into the grayness. You are tired, bone-tired, a fatigue that feels cellular. But as you stand there, you hear it, the clatter of cans. The tea is coming. The relief is palpable. It washes over you. You made it through the night. You survived the dark. And now there will be tea. The morning light reveals the trench in all its squalid glory. The mud seems deeper than yesterday. The sandbags look more ragged. You look at your hands. They are gray, the knuckles red and raw. You look at your comrades. They are gray too, their eyes hollow, their skin waxy. But they are standing. They are here. As the sun tries to burn through the mist, the daily routine begins anew. But today is different. Today there is a rumor floating down the line. A rumor that travels faster than a telegraph. Relief. The word is whispered first, then spoken with cautious hope. The battalion is due to be rotated out. You are going to rest. Rest does not mean a holiday. It means moving back from the front line to the reserve lines, or perhaps a village a few miles behind the front. It means sleeping in a barn instead of a hole. It means hot food that hasn't been carried for 2 miles. It means a chance to wash. The rumor electrifies the air. The breakfast biscuit tastes a little less like concrete. The petrol tea tastes a little sweeter. You start to pack your kit, checking your equipment. You scrape the worst of the mud off your boots. The march out is a strange experience. You move in single file through the communication trenches, winding your way back, away from the enemy. The noise of the guns recedes, becoming a background rumble rather than an immediate threat. The landscape changes slowly. The shattered stumps give way to damaged trees, then to trees that actually have branches and leaves. The brown mud gives way to patches of green grass. You see a flower growing on the side of the trench, a poppy bright red against the clay. It looks impossibly vibrant. You emerge from the trench system onto a road, a real road with cobblestones. It is covered in mud, but it is solid. You form up into a column. You are marching now, not shuffling. The rhythm of the boots on the stones is a drumbeat of survival. You pass the artillery lines, the big guns hidden under camouflage nets. The gunners look at you as you pass. They are clean-shaven, their uniforms relatively intact. You feel a mix of resentment and superiority. You have been to the edge of the world. They are just visiting. You march for miles. Your feet hurt, your shoulders ache under the weight of your pack, but you don't care. You are walking away. You pass a field kitchen that isn't mobile. It is a permanent structure with smoking chimneys. The smell hitting you is incredible. It smells of baking bread, fresh, soft bread. Not the hard loaves from the sandbags, but bread that has just come out of an oven. The saliva floods your mouth. You finally reach your billet. It is a large, drafty barn on a French farm. The roof has holes in it, and the wind whistles through the gaps in the stone walls, but to you it looks like the Ritz. There is straw on the floor, dry yellow straw. You drop your pack. You sit down on the straw. It is soft. It yields. It doesn't squelch. You take off your boots. The sensation of cool air on your damp, swollen feet is ecstasy. You peel off your socks, which are stiff with sweat and grime. You massage your toes. And then, the meal. This is the meal you have been dreaming of. The company cooks have set up their boilers in the farmyard. They have access to local produce. They have bought eggs. They have bought fresh vegetables. You line up, mess tin in hand. The ladle dips. It comes up with a thick, rich stew that is full of color. There are carrots that are actually orange. There are potatoes that are white and fluffy. There is meat that looks like meat. And then the miracle, a fried egg placed on top of the stew. The yolk is bright yellow, trembling. You take your prize back to the barn. You sit in the straw. You cut into the egg. The yolk runs over the stew, a golden river of richness. You take a bite. The flavor is overwhelming. The egg is creamy. The stew is savory. The vegetables are sweet. You eat slowly, savoring every texture. You can feel the nutrients soaking into your blood. This is not just feeding. This is healing. You wipe the tin clean with a piece of soft, fresh bread, eating the bread last, closing your eyes to fully appreciate the lack of grit. After the meal, there is the mail call. The sergeant stands on a crate shouting names. You wait, holding your breath. He calls your name. You go up and take the bundle. 2 letters and a parcel. You sit back down, your hands shaking slightly. You open the letters first. They are from your mother, your sweetheart. They talk of mundane things, the weather at home, the price of wool, the neighbor's new dog. These trivialities are anchors. They remind you that there is a world where the biggest problem is rain on laundry day. Then the parcel. It is sewn into white cloth. You pick at the stitches with your knife. Inside, wrapped in layers of newspaper, are the treasures. A pair of hand-knitted socks, thick and gray, a tin of tobacco, a bar of soap that smells of lavender, and a cake, a fruit cake dense and dark, wrapped in wax paper. You lift it to your nose. It smells of brandy and spices. You cut a slice, it is moist. You take a bite, it tastes of Christmas. It tastes of a kitchen with a roaring fire. It tastes of love. You share the cake with your section. It is the law of the soldier. You pass the chunks around. Men nod in appreciation, chewing silently. Good stuff, they say. Write and thank her. For a moment, the barn is not a military billet. It is a commons, a place of shared humanity. The evening in the rest camp is different. There is no stand-to. There is no staring into the dark. There is a concert party organized in a nearby tent. You go along. It is amateurish men dressed in drag, singing popular songs, telling bad jokes, but you laugh. You laugh until your sides hurt. You sing along to Tipperary and pack up your troubles. The sound of hundreds of men singing together is powerful. It drowns out the distant rumble of the guns. You walk back to the barn under a sky that has stars. You can actually look at the stars without fear of a flare blinding you. You crawl into the straw. You pull your greatcoat over you, but this time it is for comfort, not just survival. You are warm. You are full. You are clean, or at least cleaner than you were. You listen to the breathing of the men around you. It is deeper, more rhythmic than in the dugout. There is no tension in the air. You close your eyes. You know this is temporary. You know that in a few days you will be marching back the other way, back to the mud, the rats, and the fear. You know the war is not over. But for tonight you are safe. For tonight you have eaten well. For tonight you can sleep without one ear cocked for the sentry's warning. You let go. The darkness here is not a weight. It is a blanket. You drift off, carried away by the memory of the taste of fresh bread and the smell of lavender soap. The war is still there, waiting. But tonight you are just a man, sleeping in a barn with a full stomach. The quality of silence in the barn is different from the silence in the trench. In the line, silence is a held breath, a tension that suggests something is about to happen. Here, in the billeting barn behind the lines, silence is heavy, dust mote filled, and smells of dry hay and old wood. You wake not to the violent percussion of a mortar or the shouted order of a sentry, but to the shifting of bodies in the straw and the lowing of a cow in the adjacent shed. Sunlight, actual, unfiltered sunlight streams through the gaps in the slate roof, illuminating the floating dust like suspended gold. For a moment, disoriented by the comfort, you forget the year. You could be a farmhand napping after a harvest lunch. Then you see the stack of Enfield rifles pyramided against the wall. the mud-caked webbing hanging from rusty nails, and the reality reassembles itself. You are still a soldier, but for this brief window, you are a soldier at rest. The morning routine in the rest camp is a leisurely echo of the front. You shave. It seems like a small thing, but shaving in the trenches is a gouging, painful affair involving cold water and dull blades. Here, there is a copper boiler set up in the farmyard. You get a mug of hot water. You lather the soap, real soap, not just grit, and you scrape away the stubble of the last tour. The face that emerges in the cracked piece of mirror propped against a wagon wheel is thinner than you remember. The cheekbones are sharper, the eyes set deeper in dark sockets, but the skin feels clean. You wash your neck, scrubbing away the ring of grime where your collar rubs. You wash your feet, inspecting the pale, wrinkled skin for the beginnings of trench foot. You massage them with whale oil, a task that is usually a chore but now feels like a luxury. Breakfast is served from the field kitchens, which are parked on the solid ground of the cobblestone courtyard, rather than sinking into a swamp. The cooks are relaxed. They have had time to bake. There is bread that hasn't been compressed into a sandbag. There is bacon that has been fried rather than boiled in its own grease. You sit on a log or an upturned bucket, eating with a slowness that feels illicit. You are not scanning the horizon. You are watching a farm cat stalk a beetle. You are watching the smoke from the cookers rise straight up into the still air. The tea is still strong and sweet, but it lacks the petrol aftertaste. It tastes of tea leaves and sugar, simple and honest. The real business of the rest period, however, begins after the morning inspection. With a few francs in your pocket pay, parade having just occurred, you are free to roam within the village limits. The village is battered, a few roofs are missing tiles, and the church tower has a jagged hole near the belfry, but it is still a functioning community. It is here that the British soldier engages in his secondary campaign, the hunt for chips. The estaminet is the center of social life behind the lines. It is usually just the front room of a farmhouse or a village cottage, converted into a makeshift cafe by an enterprising local family. You walk down the village street, the sound of your hobnailed boots loud on the stones. You smell it before you see it, the scent of frying potatoes. After weeks of cold bully beef and machinachi stew, the smell of hot oil and starch is the most seductive perfume on earth. You push open the door. The room is crowded, thick with tobacco smoke that is distinctly different from the harsh army issue. It smells of French tobacco and wood smoke. The tables are rough wooden planks, crowded with soldiers in khaki. The noise is a dull roar of laughter, swearing, and the scraping of chairs. You find a space at a table, squeezing in next to men from a different platoon. There is a universal language here, a pidgin mix of English, French, and gestures. Mademoiselle, 2 oofs and frites s'il vous plaît, oofs for oofs eggs, frites for frite chips. It is the standard order. You wait, watching the madame or her daughter navigate the crowded room with platters of food. When it arrives, it is a revelation. The chips are hand-cut, thick and irregular, fried in animal fat until they are golden brown and blistering. They are piled high on a ceramic plate, not a tin one. Resting on top are 2 fried eggs, the whites crispy at the edges, the yolks soft. You eat with a reverence that borders on religious. You dip a hot, salty chip into the yolk. The crunch of the potato, the richness of the egg, the salted triggers a dopamine response in your brain that is almost overwhelming. This is food with texture. It is hot, it is fresh. It was cooked specifically for you, not for a battalion. You wash it down with vin blanc or vin rouge. The wine is usually terrible thin, acidic, and tasting faintly of vinegar. It is served in unmatched glasses or sometimes jam jars. But it is alcohol, and it is not rum. It makes you feel civilized. It loosens the tongue. As the wine flows, the stories come out. Not stories of the fighting. No one talks about the fighting here. That is bad luck, and besides, you all know what it's like. Instead, you talk about the food. You debate the merits of different tinned jams. You argue about the best way to cook a rat, purely hypothetically, of course. You talk about the meals you will eat when you get home. Sunday roast, says a man from Yorkshire, his eyes misty, with proper pudding and gravy that stands up. Jellied eels, says a Londoner, engaging in a fierce debate with a man who prefers fish and chips. These culinary fantasies are a form of torture, but they are also a way of keeping the future alive. If you can imagine the taste of your mother's apple pie, you can imagine surviving to eat it. You order another bottle of the sour wine. The room grows warmer, louder. For an hour, the war is just a rumor. You are just men in a pub, complaining about the service and laughing at bad jokes. Leaving the estaminet, blinking in the afternoon light, You might wander past the chateau where the battalion headquarters is established. The contrast is stark. Through an open window or a garden gate, you might catch a glimpse of the officers' mess. A table is set on a terrace or in a high-ceilinged room. You see a white tablecloth blindingly clean. You see crystal glasses sparkling in the sun. You see stewards in white jackets serving roast chicken, fresh salad, bottles of Scotch whiskey, and decent claret. There is a flash of resentment, sharp and hot. You know they are fighting the same war, facing the same shelling, but the inequality of the stomach is hard to ignore. They get hampers from Fortnum and Mason in London wicker baskets filled with potted grouse, anchovies, expensive chocolates, and fruitcakes that are mostly brandy. You have your bully beef, but the resentment fades quickly, replaced by a shrug. That is the way of the army. You are the PBI poor bloody infantry. You expect the mud. You expect the hardtack. You turn away and head for the regimental canteen. The canteen is a dry goods store run by the army, often set up in a tent or a requisition shed. It is here you spend the rest of your pay. You are looking for variety. You buy a tin of peaches in heavy syrupy taste of California sunshine that is impossibly sweet and soft. You buy a packet of sweet biscuits, custard creams, or bourbons, checking them carefully to make sure they aren't broken. You buy a tin of condensed milk, which you will boil in the tin to make a sort of caramel to spread on bread. You also stock up on the essentials of the trench economy. Cigarettes. Woodbines are the currency of the front. You buy as many as you can carry. You also look for candles. The army issue candles are small and burn quickly. If you can find bigger, waxier church candles, you buy them. Light is a food for the eyes in the dugout. Finally, you might buy a tin of café au lait, a pre-mixed coffee and milk powder that is vastly superior to the trench tea. You pack these treasures into your haversack, nesting them carefully among the socks and ammunition. You are a pack mule, and these are your comforts. As the afternoon wears on, you might engage in a bit of foraging. The French countryside, despite the war, is still a living landscape. If it is autumn, the hedgerows are thick with blackberries. You find a quiet lane, away from the traffic of lorries and marching columns. You pick the berries, their juice staining your fingers purple a color different from the gray and khaki of your world. You eat them by the handful, the tart sweetness exploding in your mouth. They are full of seeds, but they taste of the earth, of wildness. You might find an apple tree in an abandoned orchard. The apples are small and spotted, but you polish one on your tunic and bite into it. The crunch is deafening in the quiet lane. It is crisp, acidic, cleaning your teeth and your palate. You might even find a potato field that hasn't been completely harvested. You dig with your hands or a bayonet, unearthing the small, muddy tubers. You pocket them. Tonight, back in the barn, you will roast them in the embers of a fire. A roasted potato, the skin charred black and the inside fluffy, is a feast. You feel a connection to the land here that is different from the trench. In the trench, the earth is a wall, a grave, a trap. Here, the earth is a provider, but the idol of the rest period is fragile. It is measured in hours, not days. The rumor mill which promised you a week of rest suddenly shifts gears. A runner arrives on a bicycle. The whistle blows. Pack up, the shout echoes through the barn. The relaxation evaporates instantly. The soldier's reflex takes over. You start shoving your kit back into your pack. The blanket is rolled. The mess tin is stowed. The rifle is checked. There is a frantic consumption of the perishable. You can't carry the open bottle of wine, so you pass it around, taking deep swigs until it's gone. You eat the last of the bread. You give the rest of the chips to a stray dog. You are shedding the softness of the village, hardening yourself for the return. The march back to the line is different from the march out. The march out was driven by relief. This march is driven by duty and a heavy, stone-like dread in the pit of the stomach. It is usually done at dusk to hide the movement from enemy observation balloons and aircraft. The sky turns a bruised purple, then a deepening blue. The road is crowded with mules, limbers, and men. As you march, you are conscious of the weight on your back, but you are also conscious of the iron ration in your haversack. This is your emergency life insurance. It is a small canvas bag containing a tin of bully beef, a few hard biscuits, and a tin of tea and sugar cubes. It is sealed, and you are strictly forbidden to open it without an officer's order. To eat your iron ration without permission is a court-martial offense. It sits there, a heavy lump against your spine, a reminder that the army expects you to be cut off, to be isolated, to be desperate. It is the meal of last resort. The sounds of the peace, the church bells, the cows, the laughter in the estaminet fade behind you. They are replaced by the rising volume of the front. The distant rumble becomes a distinct thudding. The horizon begins to flicker with the summer lightning of artillery. You smell it before you are there. The smell of the trenches reaches out to greet you miles before the first communication trench. It is a sour, chemical, organic smell. The smell of chloride of lime, wet rot, cordite, and open latrines. It hits you in the back of the throat, triggering a gag reflex that you swallow down. You halt at a reserve line. It is dark now. The rest is officially over. You are back in the system. The food you ate in the village, the eggs, the chips, the apples, feels like a dream. Your stomach is already tightening, preparing for the return to the diet of preservation. You are hungry again, but not for food. You are hungry for the safety you just left. The cookers have traveled with you, but now they are back in tactical mode. No more frying, no more leisurely baking. It is back to the Dixies. The evening meal is served in the dark, in a ruined cellar or a support trench. It is stew again. Tonight, having tasted the freedom of the estaminet, the stew tastes worse. The turnips seem more bitter, the meat more mysterious. You eat it because you have to. You are a machine that needs coal. As you sit in the dark, listening to the shells passing overhead sound like ripping canvas, you reach into your pocket. You find a single custard cream biscuit you saved from the canteen. You crumble it into your mouth. The sugar is gritty. The vanilla flavor is artificial but sweet. It is a tiny bridge between the world of the barn and the world of the trench. You savor it, letting the sweetness linger as long as possible. Then the order comes to move up. Packs on. You stand up. The weight settles on your shoulders. You check your water bottle. It is full of the petrol-tasting water again. You are ready. You step onto the duckboards. The mud sucks at your boots. Slap, squelch, slap. You are walking back into the earth. The memory of the fried egg is gone. There is only the dark, the mud, and the waiting. The transition back to the front line is a psychological stripping. You shed the civilian layers you accumulated during the few days of rest. The softness, the laughter, the expectation of comfort, you peel them off and drop them in the mud. You put on the armor of indifference. You stop thinking about flavor and start thinking about calories. You stop thinking about comfort and start thinking about warmth. You arrive at your new section of the line. It is a different trench, but it looks exactly the same as the last one. The same geometry of dirt and sandbags, the same smell. The men you are relieving look like ghosts, eyes white in mud-blackened faces. They file past you, whispering "good luck, mate," and keep your head down. You take their place on the fire step. You settle in. You put your pack down in a dugout that smells of the previous occupants. You look for a place to put your candle. You take out your mess tin. It is empty, but you are already planning the next meal. You wonder if the ration party will make it through the shelling. You wonder if there will be bacon or just the fat. You wonder if the water will be clean. The cycle has reset. The interruption of the rest camp highlights the absurdity of your existence. Hours ago, you were eating chips on a plate. Now you are holding a rifle in a ditch. The stomach adapts faster than the mind. Your gut is already growling, demanding the dense, salty fuel of the trench. You check your pocket for that last piece of chocolate. It's warm and soft from your body heat. You don't eat it yet. You save it. You save it for the darkest part of the night, for the wolf hour. You lean against the sandbag wall. You wait. The war goes on. The night deepens, and with it comes the cold. The warmth of the barn is a distant memory, a hallucination. The reality is the damp wool of your tunic, the icy water in the bottom of the trench, and the hard biscuit in your pocket. You run your thumb over the surface of the biscuit. It is rough, unyielding. It is the texture of your life now. You are back in the world of hard things. Hard earth, hard metal, hard food. You take a breath of the cold air, tasting the chemicals and the rot. You are home. In the hours that follow, as you stand your watch, your mind drifts not to the grand meals of the past, but to the small victories of the future. You strategize, you plan. You think about how you will crush the biscuit tomorrow morning to make it edible. You think about how you will use the candle to heat a cup of water. You think about the tin of sardines you have hidden in your pack. These are the objectives of your war. Survival is a series of small culinary conquests. You watch a flare go up, illuminating the wasteland. For a second, the light reflects off a pool of water in a shell crater, making it look like a silver platter. You almost smile. The mind plays tricks when it is hungry and tired. You shift your weight, your boots squelching. You are ready for the long night. You are ready for the tea that tastes of petrol. You are ready to endure. The afternoon in the trench has a specific heavy texture. It is a time of suspended animation, where the frantic activity of the morning stand-to has faded, and the terrifying unknown of the night patrol has not yet arrived. You are living in the quiet hours, though the term is relative. There is still the intermittent crack of a sniper's rifle, the lazy drone of an observation plane, and the distant rolling thunder of artillery on a different sector of the line. But here in your section, the war has paused for lunch, or rather it has paused for the long, slow process of waiting for the next meal. You are sitting on the fire step, knees pulled up to your chest to conserve warmth. The clay wall behind you is damp, leaching the heat from your uniform, but you hardly notice it anymore. Your world has shrunk to the contents of your haversack and the small, illicit culinary project you are about to undertake. You have decided to cook. Cooking in the front line is strictly forbidden in many sectors due to the smoke, which attracts mortar fire, but it is a rule universally ignored. The army feeds you to keep you alive. You cook for yourself to feel human. You have constructed a Tommy cooker, the soldier's stove. It is a masterpiece of junk engineering. You have taken an empty bully beef tin, punched holes in the sides with a bayonet for ventilation, and filled the bottom with a strip of burlap sacking soaked in whale oil, the same oil used to prevent trench foot. You strike a match, shielding the flame inside your tunic. You touch it to the oil-soaked fabric. It catches with a sputter, producing a small, smoky yellow flame that smells of burning fat and wet dog. It is a dirty heat, but it is heat. You balance your mess tin on top of the can. Into the tin goes a mixture that would horrify a civilian chef, but which to you represents the height of gastronomy. You have shaved some flakes off a block of hard cheese. You have crumbled a hardtack biscuit into powder. You have added a splash of water from your canteen, and the piece de resistance, a dollop of Tickler's plum and apple jam. You stir this gray-pink sludge with the tip of your knife. The heat from the whale oil flame is weak, so the process is agonizingly slow. You watch the bubbles form at the edges. You are entirely focused on the chemistry of the tin. You are willing the mixture to thicken, to transform from a collection of cold rations into a hot meal. The smell begins to rise. It is sweet, salty, and smoky. It smells of burning sugar and old cheese. It is the smell of the trenches. While you wait, you look at your hands. They are stained with the yellow residue of the lyddite explosives, the brown of the mud, and the black of the cooker's soot. You wonder if you will ever be clean again. You wonder if the grease has permanently altered the composition of your skin. The hygiene of eating here is a constant psychological battle. You know the rats run over these sandbags. You know the flies land on the latrines and then on your food. You know the water in your canteen was pumped through a hose that lay in the mud. But the hunger overrides the disgust. The biological imperative to consume calories is stronger than the fear of germs. The mixture in the tin finally begins to simmer. You extinguish the flame quickly, crushing the burning burlap with a stone to kill the smoke. You wrap your hand in a piece of rag to lift the hot tin. You take a spoonful. It is scalding hot, burning the roof of your mouth. The texture is gluey. The flavor is a confusing clash of intense sugar from the jam and the sharp, sweaty tang of the cheese. But it is hot. It spreads a radiant warmth through your chest that the cold wind cannot touch. You eat it slowly, scraping the tin until the metal shines. This is pazi, the slang for jam, but it has become a catch-all term for these sweet, sticky improvisations. Thirst is the shadow that follows the hunger. The salt in the bully beef, the salt in the cheese, the smoke in the air, it all conspires to dry you out. Your canteen is your lifeline, but the water inside is a source of constant suspicion. It is brought up in the same petrol cans, filtered and chlorinated until it tastes like a swimming pool mixed with gasoline. You take a sip. The chemical taste catches in your throat. It wets your mouth but doesn't seem to quench the thirst. You look at the puddles on the trench floor. The water there is clear, settled. It looks refreshing, but you know it is poison. It is shell-hole water, contaminated with the decomposition of the battlefield. Men who drink it out of desperation die of dysentery or typhus. You have seen them, wasted away, their strength gone, carried out on stretchers not because of a bullet, but because of a sip of water. So you stick to the petrol water. You dream of a glass faucet. You dream of ice cubes. You dream of a mountain stream. The obsession with clean water is a constant background noise in your mind, louder even than the artillery. As the afternoon wears on, a different kind of hunger sets in, the hunger for variety. The monotony of the rations is a form of psychological erosion. Day after day of the same textures, the same colors. You find yourself staring at the label of a discarded tin, reading the ingredients list as if it were a novel. Salt, beef, sugar, sodium nitrate. You memorize the fonts. You analyze the logo. Anything to break the visual sameness of the mud. This is why the arrival of the mail is the most significant event of the day. The post-corporal makes his way down the trench, a sack over his shoulder. He is Santa Claus in khaki. He calls out names. When he calls yours, your heart rate spikes. He hands you a parcel. It is wrapped in brown paper, tied with hairy string, and sealed with red wax. It is battered, having traveled from a kitchen table in England, via train to the coast, by ship to France, by lorry to the railhead, and by mule to the reserve lines. You sit on a crate to open it. You don't rip it open. You untie the string carefully. You might need that string later. You unfold the paper. You might need that paper for writing a letter or for lighting a fire. Inside, nestled in straw or crumpled newspaper, are the treasures: a tin of condensed milk, a packet of chocolate biscuits, a tin of sardines, a bag of pear drops. You hold the bag of pear drops up to the light. They are red and yellow, dusted with sugar. They look like jewels. You put one in your mouth. The flavor is artificial, intense, and sharp. It tastes of pear and acetone. It is a shock to your system. Your salivary glands ache. For 10 minutes while that sweet dissolves, you are not in the trench. You are in a sweet shop. You are a child. The sugar rushes to your brain, giving you a momentary high, a clarity of thought that the dull diet of beef and biscuit denies you. The tin of sardines is a different kind of luxury. It requires a key to open. You peel back the lid, revealing the silver fish packed tight in oil. This is fat, pure rich fat. You eat them on a biscuit, letting the oil soak into the dry cracker. The bones crunch softly. The fishy taste is strong, masking the metallic taste of the air. You wipe the oil from the tin with your finger and lick it off. You don't waste a drop. You offer the tin to the man next to you. He takes a fingerful of oil. It is a communion. But the greatest prize in a parcel is the trench cake. This is a fruit cake baked by your mother or wife, designed to survive the journey. It is dense, heavy with raisins and currants, and often soaked in brandy or rum to preserve it. You cut a slice with your bayonet. The crust is hard, but the inside is moist. You smell the spices: cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves. These are the smells of the trade routes of the empire of Christmas. They are alien to this landscape of rot. You eat the cake with a solemnity that borders on the sacred. You chew every raisin. You taste the burnt currants on the crust. You feel the density of the flour. This is not just food. It is a physical manifestation of love. Someone, weeks ago, stood in a warm kitchen, mixed these ingredients, and thought of you. They imagined you eating it. The connection across the miles is palpable. It makes you feel less abandoned, less like a number in a ledger. However, the parcel also brings danger. Food attracts the competition. You hear the scratching before you see them. The rats know the sound of crinkling paper. They know the smell of sugar. They appear from the drainage holes, from behind the sandbags. They watch you with beady, intelligent eyes. You throw a stone at one, and it barely flinches. It just moves a few inches and waits. You have to store your food in a metal tin or hang it from the roof of the dugout on a wire, suspended in midair. Even then, they sometimes find a way. You have seen a rat drop from the ceiling onto a hanging haversack, gnawing through the canvas to get to a piece of chocolate. It is a constant war of attrition between you and the vermin. Late afternoon brings a shift in the atmosphere. The light begins to fail, the gray sky deepening to a bruised purple. The temperature drops and the damp mist begins to rise from the ground. It is time for the evening stand-to. You pack away your treasures. You check your rifle. You climb back onto the fire step. But before the full darkness sets in, the ration party arrives with the evening meal. Tonight, the rumor is that it's hot stew. You line up with your mess tin. The Dixie is set down. The steam rises. You look inside. It is Maconochie again. But this time, the cooks have tried to stretch it. They have added local vegetables, forage, or perhaps stolen from the French fields. You see chunks of turnip, unrecognizable greens that might be cabbage or might be weeds, and potatoes that are boiling down into a starch paste. The server ladles a portion into your tin. It slops in, gray and lumpy. You retreat to your spot. You examine the stew. There is a slug, boiled white, resting on a piece of potato. You pause. In your previous life, this would have been a cause for a scene in a restaurant. You would have sent the dish back. Here, you simply flick the slug over the parapet with your spoon. You don't stop eating. Protein is protein. The vegetables are bitter, but they offer a texture that isn't hardtack. The greens are stringy and tough, requiring serious chewing. This is good. It gives your jaw something to do. As you eat, you notice the man next to you isn't eating. He is sitting staring at the duck boards, his mess tin untouched. This is a bad sign. Loss of appetite is the first symptom of trench fever or the flu, or simply the crushing weight of depression. You nudge him. Get it down, you say. It's not a request, it's an order. He shakes his head. Can't, he says. Stomach's gone. You look at his food. It is getting cold, the fat's starting to congeal. You are torn. Part of you wants to take it. Your body is screaming for the extra calories. but the code of the trench holds you back. You don't steal a mate's food while he's looking at it. Instead, you offer a trade. I'll swap you a cigarette for your beef, you say. He looks up. A cigarette is a sedative. It is more valuable to him right now than nutrition. He nods. You hand him a woodbine. He hands you his tin. You scrape his stew into yours. You eat a double portion. You feel guilty, but you also feel full. The guilt passes. The fullness remains. The sun is gone now. The trench is a canyon of shadows. You are finishing your meal in the dark. You can't see what you are eating anymore, which is perhaps a blessing. You rely on taste and texture. You encounter a piece of gristle in the meat that is impossible to chew. You suck on it for a while, extracting the salt, then spit it out. You wipe your tin with a piece of bread, eating the cleaning cloth. Now the real challenge begins, the night. The digestion of the heavy, greasy meal draws blood away from your extremities, making you feel the cold more intensely for a while. You shiver. You button your greatcoat. You check your pockets. You have 3 biscuits, a piece of chocolate from the parcel, and a half-full canteen. This is your inventory for the next 12 hours. You find yourself craving something hot to drink, but the tea has already been served and is long gone. You think about the soup tablets that some soldiers buy from the canteen, compressed blocks of bouillon that look like glue. If you could just get a cup of hot water, but lighting a fire now is impossible. The darkness is absolute. A flame would be a beacon for a sniper. You are resigned to a cold night. You lean against the sandbags, the rough hessian scratching your cheek. You can taste the dinner lingering in your mouth, the onions, the fat. It's not a pleasant aftertaste, but it is a reminder of substance. You burp, and it tastes of turnips. Your mind wanders to the concept of a dining room. You try to reconstruct one in your head. A mahogany table, high-backed chairs with velvet cushions, silver cutlery that feels heavy and cool in the hand, a napkin, a piece of white linen that you place on your lap. The idea of a napkin seems absurdly delicate. You look at your own lap, covered in mud, crumbs, and grease stains. You are wearing your tablecloth. Suddenly, a shell lands closer than the others. The ground jumps. Dirt showers down on you, falling into your collar, into your hair. You instinctively cover your mess tin, even though it's empty. It's a reflex. Protect the food source. The dust hangs in the air, gritty and dry. You cough. The taste of the explosion is in your mouth now, acrid, chemical, like sucking on a penny. It overpowers the taste of the stew. You spit, trying to clear it, but the dust coats your tongue. You take a sip of water. The petrol taste mixes with the cordite taste. It is a vile cocktail. You hear a voice down the line calling for a stretcher bearer. Someone wasn't lucky. The reality of the war reasserts itself over the reality of the dinner. But even as the medics move past, crouching low, your stomach gurgles. The body continues its demands regardless of the violence. You decide to ration your chocolate. You break off one square. You place it on your tongue and press it against the roof of your mouth. You let it melt slowly. You don't chew, you want it to last. The sweetness is a tiny, private room you can retreat into. For the 3 minutes that the chocolate lasts, you are safe. You are warm. You are happy. When it is gone, you are back in the wet ditch. You start to think about breakfast. It is 10 hours away. You wonder if there will be bacon. You start to plan how you will cook the bacon if there is a fire. You will thread it onto a piece of wire and hold it over the coals. You will catch the dripping fat on a biscuit. Yes, that is a good plan. This planning is what keeps you sane. You are not thinking about the offensive next week. You are not thinking about the probability of death. You are thinking about bacon fat on a biscuit. The night drags on. The temperature continues to drop. You stamp your feet to keep the circulation going. The mud freezes, becoming hard and jagged. It crunches under your boots. You feel the cold seeping through the soles of your boots. You are hungry again. The stew has been processed. The furnace needs more coal. You reach for a biscuit. It is cold and hard as stone. You can't risk breaking a tooth in the dark. You put the whole biscuit in your mouth, holding it in your cheek like a hamster. You let your saliva soften it. It takes a long time. It tastes of flour and sacking. It is a slow dissolution of starch. It is boring, but it is something to do. You hear the man next to you, the one who traded his stew, coughing. It is a wet, chesty cough. You wonder if he made a bad trade. Maybe he needed the food more than the cigarette. But out here, choices are simple and binary. Comfort now versus fuel for later. He chose comfort. You chose fuel. You look up at the strip of sky visible between the trench walls. There are no stars tonight, just a low, oppressive cloud cover. It feels like the lid on a pot. You are ingredients in a stew of mud and men, simmering slowly on the fire of the Western Front. You close your eyes for a second, just resting them. You see a loaf of bread, a white, crusty loaf, sliced thick, with butter yellow, salty butter spread so thick it leaves teeth marks when you bite it. The image is so clear it is almost a hallucination. You open your eyes. There is only the mud. You check your water bottle again. It feels lighter. You have to be careful. If you run out of water before dawn, the thirst will become agony. You screw the cap back on tight. You check the seal. Water is life. A rat runs over your foot. You feel the weight of it, the scrabble of claws on leather. You don't move. You are too tired to kick it. Go on then, you whisper. Get fat. You know that eventually the rats eat everything. They are the ultimate beneficiaries of this war. You shift your position on the fire step. Your legs are numb. You are waiting for the dawn, but more importantly, you are waiting for the tea. The tea is the horizon. If you can make it to the tea, you have made it through the night. You focus on that. The smell of the petrol tea, the heat of the metal mug, the sugar. You hold that thought like a weapon against the cold. You wait. You endure. You hunger. Final, most difficult part of the day, or rather, the part that feels like it should be the end of the day, is the long, slow crawl toward the morning. You are now fully immersed in the rhythm of the night watch, which is less a period of time and more a state of being, a cold, damp awareness broken only by the clock-like demands of the war. You are physically exhausted, but your nerves are singing a high, tense note, refusing true rest. Your body is rationing its heat and its remaining calories with grim efficiency. Your focus narrows entirely to the micro details of your environment. You listen to the sound of the water dripping from the overhead timbers, trying to determine if it is merely condensation or if the dugout roof is giving way. You study the grain of the wood on your rifle stock, tracing the swirls with a muddy finger. Your attention is so finely tuned that the sudden arrival of a sound of voice, a flare, the crunch of a boot on a nearby duckboard is physically startling. And beneath all this awareness is the gnawing discomfort of being permanently damp. The wool of your tunic and trousers holds water like a sponge. The greatcoat feels twice its normal weight, heavy with absorbed moisture. This dampness, combined with the low temperatures of the pre-dawn hours, begins the long, slow assault on your feet. You are constantly shifting your weight, stamping your boots on the fire step. This is not just to keep warm. It is a defense against the debilitating reality of trench foot. You know the routine. You must keep the circulation going. The moment your feet become numb, the moment you can no longer feel your toes, you are in danger. The numbness is an illusion of comfort, a betrayal. It means the capillaries are collapsing, the blood is retreating, and the soft tissues are starting to die. You have seen men carried out with feet that are gray, swollen, and rotting. The smell of that gangrene sweet and rotten is one of the unforgettable smells of the trench. So you stamp, you wriggle your toes inside the wet leather, you massage your ankles, constantly engaged in a desperate, quiet struggle against the very ground you stand on. This constant fight for warmth burns enormous energy. You are using calories just to shiver. You reach into your pocket for the last of the trench cake you saved from the parcel. It is compressed and warm from your body heat. You break off a tiny piece, smaller than a thumbnail. You place it under your tongue. This is not for hunger, it is for morale. The brandy-soaked fruit is an intense, concentrated sweetness. It is a chemical signal to your brain. Life is good, keep going. It releases a tiny burst of sugar, a fleeting moment of clarity. You think about the logistics of the field kitchens, which are now beginning their pre-dawn work far behind the lines. You imagine the massive iron cauldrons being stoked, the rough-faced cooks, their hands blackened by soot, stirring the boiling water with oars. The hiss of the steam, the piles of bully beef tins being opened, the mountains of sugar and condensed milk. The whole operation is enormous, inefficient, and slow, yet it is utterly vital. It is the supply chain of survival. Every hot cup of tea that makes it to the front is a victory of organization over chaos, a triumph of human endeavor over mud and distance. But the field kitchens are also subject to the war. You remember the story of a cookhouse that took a direct hit. The explosion was not just a cloud of smoke and splintered wood. It was an explosion of food. Stew, fat, flour, and tea leaves plastered to the trees and the mud. The sheer waste of it was a deeper horror to the men than the sight of the wreckage. In the trenches, the destruction of food is seen as a greater sin than the destruction of equipment. The long hours of the watch bring philosophical musings, not the grand ideas of a scholar, but the small, grounded thoughts of a survivor. You think about the food you left behind in the rest camp, the fried eggs, the chips. You realize now that the taste of those meals was not in the ingredients, but in the context. They tasted of freedom, of clean air, of being safe enough to let your guard down. Eating a sardine in a dugout is just consumption. Eating a warm potato in a sunlit barn is an act of civilization. The war has stripped all meaning from food except its core function, energy. As the pre-dawn mist thickens, Visibility drops to almost nothing. You stand on the fire step, a solid, cold pillar of wool and leather. You listen for the telltale sounds of an enemy patrol moving through the mist, the muffled cough, the clink of a messed tin, the scrape of metal on stone. The men in the line opposite you are doing the exact same thing, freezing, hungry, waiting for the first light. And then, as if a switch were thrown, the tension breaks. The darkness starts to recede. It happens not with a dramatic flourish, but with a subtle change in the air pressure, a shift in the quality of the light filtering through the clouds. The sky stops being black and becomes a featureless, exhausted gray. The order comes whispered down the line. Stand to. You are already there. You have been there all night. This final ritual is a confirmation that you made it. Every man on the fire step is checking his weapon, watching the wire, waiting for the enemy to make their dawn attack. But this morning, as most mornings, the attack does not come. The sun breaks the horizon, a pale, distant promise of light. The whistle blows for stand down. And with that sound, the thought, which has been your single point of focus for the last 3 hours, becomes a reality. The tea is coming. You hear the shout from the communication trench. Rations up. The ration party appears, moving slowly, burdened by their cargo. They look like mud statues, their eyes red-rimmed and hollow. They have navigated the maze of the trenches in the dark, risking machine gun fire and snipers to bring you the fuel. They dump the precious petrol cans, the Dixies, onto the fire step. The metal clanks heavily. A cloud of steam, gray and oily, rises from the opened can. The steam carries the inevitable smell of petrol, but today that smell is comforting. It is the smell of warmth and energy. You unclip your mess tin from your gear, holding it out. The sergeant dips the ladle into the black, syrupy liquid and pours. The tea hits the tin with a satisfying slosh. It is scalding hot. The heat radiates through the thin metal, immediately warming your cold, numb fingers. You cup the mug in both hands, bringing it close to your face. You inhale the steam. It is not a fine claret, it is a miracle. You take a long, deep sip. It is thick with condensed milk, intensely sweet with sugar, and bitter with overbrewed tea leaves. And yes, it tastes of petrol. But it is hot, it is sweet. It is exactly what your shivering, depleted body requires. It is 200 calories of instant warmth. You feel the sugar spike in your blood, chasing away the cold and the exhaustion. The bread arrives next. The gray, dense loaves, often flattened in transit. You take your ration. It is stale, the crust hard. You use the handle of your knife to tear off a chunk. You dunk it into the tea, letting the hot, sweet liquid soak into the dry crumb until it is soft enough to chew. You scrape the jam tin, finding a hidden pocket of plum and apple. You spread it on the softened bread. This is the meal that signifies survival. You have endured the dark, the cold, the fear, and the hunger. You eat standing up, watching the mist slowly burn off the ground, revealing the chaos of no man's land. The food provides the strength to face the drudgery of the day ahead. The endless digging, the repairs, the cleaning of equipment, and the constant battle with the mud. You finish the tea, draining the last sweet, gritty drops. You scrape the mess tin clean with your thumb and lick it off. There is no washing up here. The tin goes straight back into your haversack, ready for the next meal, its surfaces coated in a thin film of tea and grease. The consumption of this breakfast is not the end of the hunger, but it is the temporary silencing of the worst of it. You look around at the other men. They are all engaged in the same mechanical act of refueling. The silence is broken only by the slurping of tea and the sound of chewing. No one speaks. They are too busy extracting the maximum possible energy and comfort from their meager rations. The communal act of eating this terrible, wonderful food is the foundation of the soldier's social structure. It is the moment when the isolation of the night watch is replaced by the quiet camaraderie of shared survival. You see the man next to you shivering and offer him a piece of your hard cheese. He nods his thanks and takes it. No words are needed. It is a transaction of survival, built on mutual respect and shared experience. You are full now, heavy in the stomach, warm in the chest. You pull out your tobacco tin and roll a cigarette, a thin, hand-rolled cylinder of rough tobacco. You light it, cupping the match against the breeze. The smoke is harsh in your throat, but the nicotine is a final, necessary jolt. You lean back against the sandbags. The physical strain has been momentarily relieved. The body is fed. The mind is sedated. The day begins. The sun is now fully up, though it offers little warmth. Fatigue sets in, deep and pervasive, now that the immediate threat of the night is past. But you are sustained. You survive. You will continue to survive, one salty, sweet, petrol-tasting meal at a time. The logistics of survival have triumphed for another 12 hours. You will spend the rest of the morning cleaning your gear, sleeping in short, stolen bursts in the dugout, and planning the consumption of the bully beef tin you have saved for midday. The entire structure of your day will be built around these few, meager rations. The war for the poor bloody infantry is fought with bullets and bayonets, but it is endured on bully beef and bitter tea. You take a final, deep drag of the cigarette. The smoke drifts up and over the parapet, a small, pale column against the endless gray. The cycle continues. You wait for the midday meal. The hours between the end of the morning, stand to, and the first meal of the afternoon are dedicated to the relentless, soul-crushing toil of trench upkeep. You are not fighting the enemy right now. You are fighting the physics of the earth. The constant damp, the weight of the sandbags, and the lack of drainage mean the trenches are perpetually collapsing, sliding, and filling with water. Your morning is spent with a shovel, not a rifle. You are part of a fatigue party, deepening a sump pit or shoring up a crumbling fire bay. The work is backbreaking. The clay is heavy, clinging to the shovel with an infuriating suction. Every swing of the tool is a full-body workout. The exertion makes you sweat, but the damp air immediately cools the sweat, chilling you to the bone. You are encased in a cycle of exertion and chill. The smell of the freshly turned earth is strong, a deep mineral odor mixed with the inevitable scent of human waste and decomposing organic matter. You are digging up history, but you are also digging up the biological consequences of thousands of men living in one narrow channel of mud. You find pieces of old shell fragments, rusting wire, and sometimes bones. You toss the metal over the parapet. The bones are quickly reburied without comment. This is the way of the trench. As you work, the craving for sustenance returns, but it is a slow, steady demand now, not the desperate, frantic hunger of the night. Your body needs salt to replace what you are sweating out, and it needs fat to provide the dense, slow-burning fuel for the labor. You pull out the tin of bully beef you saved from the last ration run. It is standard issue, 300 grams of salted, preserved meat. You hate this tin, but you respect its efficiency. It is entirely self-contained, a perfect little cube of dense nutrition. You take the small metal key attached to the side and insert it into the tab. You turn the key slowly, the soft tin protesting with a rhythmic, tearing sound. Metal ribbon peels away, curling back, and the slab of compressed, pinkish-red corned beef is revealed. You dig into the meat with your sheath knife, scooping out a large, cold chunk. It is firm, encased in a thick layer of congealed white fat. The salt hits you instantly, stinging the inside of your mouth. You chew it slowly. The texture is grainy, stringy, almost dry despite the fat. It sticks to the roof of your mouth. You are eating it without bread, without biscuit, without anything to cut the intense saltiness. You are eating it purely for the protein and the fat content. This is the great trade-off of the trench diet. Everything that keeps the food from spoiling makes it a misery to eat. The salt acts as a preservative, but it forces you to drink more of the unpleasant, chemically tasting water. The fat prevents the meat from drying out, but it feels like you are consuming cold candle wax. You wash the meat down with a measured sip of your canteen water, the chemical taste of the water mixing with the metallic salt of the beef. Sometimes, if you are feeling daring, you try to make the beef into a risole. You take a piece of newspaper, a precious commodity in the trench end, tear off a small, blank corner. You mash the bully beef in your mess tin, crumbling in some powdered biscuit if you can spare it, or a bit of dried ration potato. You mix it until it forms a cohesive gray ball. If you are extremely lucky, you have saved a tiny sliver of fat from the morning's bacon ration. You balance the mess tin on your tiny Tommy cooker, melting the fat, then flatten the meatball into a patty and try to fry it. The smell of the frying meat, however faint, is intoxicating. It is the smell of a real kitchen, a memory of a Sunday lunch. But the frying must be brief, the flame instantly smothered, the resulting patty often still cold in the center and just barely browned on the outside. You eat it quickly, hiding the process from the watchful eye of a sergeant who might confiscate your illicit stove. The hot fat and the crispy edges are a small, temporary victory over the monotony. The social structure of the trench is often negotiated through the medium of food. While official ranks determine command, the true status among the men is often determined by access to and generosity with supplementary rations. The man who receives the best parcels from home, who gets the tinned delicacies, the superior tobacco, the concentrated soup cubes, is held in high regard. You might engage in a small, quiet bartering session with a man from your section. He has a tin of Spread Eagle brand condensed milk, a luxury you crave, but he has run out of tobacco. You trade him 4 Woodbine cigarettes for the milk. The transaction is done without ceremony, a silent passing of goods over a sandbag. You take your prize. You are not going to drink this milk straight. That is an extravagance reserved for the desperate. You will hooch it. You take the unopened tin of condensed milk, place it carefully in your mess tin, and cover it with the hottest water you can procure, usually near the cookers or on a long-burning Tommy cooker. You leave it to simmer for 3 hours. The heat caramelizes the sugar, and the milk solids inside the sealed can. When you open the can, the liquid inside has transformed. It is thick, sticky, and browner, rich, dark caramel. It is intensely sweet, concentrated flavor. You lick it out with your spoon, spreading a minuscule amount on the last piece of hardtack you own. This tiny amount of caramel is a powerful psychological tool. It is indulgence. It is a reward for surviving the morning. It is a taste of something that is not salt or mud. The afternoon also brings the necessity of the latrines. The food you are eating is hard on the digestive system, preserved, unvaried, often contaminated. The latrines are shallow pits dug into the rear of the trench, sometimes covered by a wooden pole to sit on. The pits are treated with chloride of lime. The chemical smell is harsh, a constant reminder of sanitation efforts. But the chemicals cannot mask the odor of human waste and decay. The air is heavy, attracting swarms of flies in the warmer months, creating a vicious cycle of disease. You learn to move quickly, to hold your breath, and to choose the moment carefully. Privacy is non-existent, and human dignity is worn away slowly, inch, by the necessities of life in a ditch. The constant low-level stomach trouble, the wind, the cramps, the diarrhea is simply accepted as a condition of service. You see men standing guard, doubled over with pain, and they don't complain, they endure. As you finish your work for the afternoon, the sun begins its slow descent toward the western horizon. The shift in light triggers a final, obsessive inventory of your resources before the long night ahead. You count your cigarettes, you count your biscuits, you check the level of your canteen. You ensure your iron ration is still safely sealed. You might use this time to write a letter home, not to talk about the war, but to talk about the food. You might ask for a specific brand of chocolate. You might describe the exact ingredients of a meal you miss. The letters are filled with these small domestic details because they are the safest things to talk about, and they also carry the deepest meaning. They are a way of saying, I'm still a person who cares about flavor, not just calories. The evening meal approaches, heralded by the rhythmic clank-clank of the returning ration party and the Dixies. Tonight, the hope is for the elusive hot soup. You line up, mess tin ready. The cooks have made a soup from dried vegetables and bouillon cubes stretched with water. It is hot, which is the key feature. It is a thin, savory liquid, tasting strongly of celery and salt. You drink it quickly, feeling the warmth spread. The final piece of your daily ration is the issue of cheese. It is a block of hard, oily army cheddar. You cut a piece with your knife. You eat it with the last of your bread. It is strong, almost acrid, and it makes your throat dry. But it is concentrated fat and protein fuel for the sentry duty. As the light fades, the atmosphere of the trench changes for the final time. The day's work is done. The last hot food has been consumed. The exhaustion is overwhelming, but you know you cannot sleep yet. The stand-to is coming. You climb onto the fire step, your heavy boots thudding on the duckboard. The world outside the trench walls is turning into a sheet of gray. The air is still, waiting. You take a final sip of your water, rinsing the taste of salt and cheese from your mouth. The petrol water is not refreshing, but it is wet. You see a tiny, flickering light in the trench opposite, an enemy soldier, maybe lighting a cigarette. A sniper's opportunity, but you look away. You are done with the business of observation for a moment. You are focused on the quiet inner reality of your survival. The food you ate today, the bitter tea, the salty beef, the gluey stew, the precious sweet square of cake, it has served its purpose. It has kept the machine running. You are a biological entity that requires fuel, and the army has provided the minimum necessary to keep you alive and useful. It is a harsh contract, but a reliable one. You pull your rough, scratchy blanket from your pack and drape it over your shoulders. The last thing you do before the darkness completely envelops you is check the pocket where you have hidden the remaining half square of chocolate. It is there, solid and cool. It is your ultimate reserve, your final piece of morale. It will wait for the deepest part of the night. The whistle blows. Stand to. You shoulder your rifle. The darkness rushes in. The cold sets its grip. The process of surviving the night begins again. You are full, but you are not comfortable. You are alive, but you are not safe. You are a man in a trench, waiting for the hours to pass, focusing on the rhythmic sound of your own breathing. The only promise the trench ever gives you is the tea that will arrive at dawn. And so, you wait for the tea.